All right, y'all, I can't stay away. I can't stay away. I'm off the air for 5 seconds, and there's already like 100 more things to talk about. So, as I'm sure all of you know, and you've already seen, yesterday there was a horrific plane and helicopter crash at Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C. It appears like there are no survivors. The helicopter collided with the plane when they were about 300 feet from landing, and they all plunged into the freezing Potomac River. They've been able to recover some of the bodies, but as I said, it looks like nobody survived. Just a horrible situation all around. You know, it looks, to the layman's eye, it looks like, man, this was totally preventable. It looks like the helicopter just flew directly into the plane. It almost looked like it was on purpose, even though there's zero evidence that it was on purpose. But just horrible video if you haven't seen it. I'm not going to show it here, but, you know, I'm sure many of you have seen it by now already. Well, anyway, so this happened yesterday. And today, so Trump commented on it last night. It was a classic. It sounded like a third grader talking about the issue. He was like, not good. This is not good. Should have been avoided, but not good. Well, he comes out today and does a press conference on this issue. And this was abysmal. Like, it just absolutely pathetic. Just complete and utter lack of leadership. So the main thrust of what he says in this press conference is blame diversity for this plane crash. I wish I was kidding. Here's one of the things he said, quote, I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, here's one, the FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. So he's trying to say, hey, maybe this was because of DEI. Maybe this is because they decided to hire people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. I mean, first of all, to state the obvious, you have to be like mosquito level IQ to think that the hiring of people with intellectual disabilities, like they're putting them in situations where they directly control the air traffic, right? Like, is there anybody in the country who thinks, oh yeah, they looked for a guy with, an IQ of 48 and they said, sir, you control, the flights in and out. Like, no, obviously they're doing other jobs that don't have nearly as high stakes as part of the FAA. Like, it's just incredible he would come out and say something like that, basically trying to be like, oh, this is the fault of DEI practices. That's why we are where we are. So we also have a reporter pushed him on that and basically said, I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion that diversity had something to do with this crash. In other words, like, hey man, there's no evidence of this. This is a really irresponsible thing to say at a moment like this. Trump responds, because I have common sense, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't. In other words, it's, quote, common sense to blame this horrible plane and helicopter crash on DEI, on diversity. Okay. So we also have, this is fascinating too, one of the reporters says to Trump, the implication that he's making is that this policy that you're talking about is new or that it comes from the Biden administration. That's demonstrably false. And then Trump tries to weasel at it. Who said that? Did you say that? And the guy says, it's been on the FAA's website since 2013. Why didn't you change that policy during your first administration? So even the thing Trump is trying to deflect with, to say, oh, this is the fault of DEI, this is the fault of their hiring practices, that policy has been in place since 2013 and has consistently stayed there. So even under his time in office, his first term, that didn't change. So first of all, the thing's not to blame anyway. Second of all, if you were to bring it up and blame it, okay, why didn't you change the policy when you were president? It's so desperate. It's so pathetic. It's such a clear attempt to deflect and obfuscate and distract from the reality of the situation. Now, by the way, what is the reality of the situation? Get this. Since Trump has come into office, he's already taken a number of actions regarding airline safety. Guess which direction he decided to go in? So the FAA administrator quit on January 20th after Elon told him to resign. Okay, that's strike one. Ready? We're short about 3,000 air traffic controllers. And Trump and Elon are attempting now to reduce that number even further, reduce the number of air traffic controllers even further. He's got this cockamamie idea where it's like, hey, if you submit a resignation, we'll pay you for the next 7 months. And there's this whole thing that they're trying to do now to reduce the number of government employees, including at the FAA. Okay, that's strike 2. Strike 3, Trump fired 100 FAA senior officials since he got into office. He gutted a key aviation safety committee. And of course, the FAA was part of this hiring freeze that they did. He's done a hiring freeze on air traffic controllers since he took office. So why is he desperately out there saying, blame DEI, blame diversity? He's doing it to try to deflect from the fact that his record on airline safety is abysmal. These people don't believe in government. They don't believe in government. As Ronald Reagan said, they want it to be small enough so they can drown it in the bathtub. Well, guess what? There are consequences to that belief. If you try to implement that philosophy, bad things happen. This is one of those bad things. So he's trying to hide the fact that his record on airline safety is absolutely horrific. That's what he's doing. So these policies need to change. Now, if he decided to come out and say, hey, man, we had this horrible crash, we're going to go in a different direction when it comes to the FAA because apparently we need to beef it up. We're not going to cut it. We're going to grow it. We're going to make sure we fill this 3,000 air traffic controller shortage that we have. If he used this crash to come out and course correct, then I'd be out here saying, okay, that's great. That's responsible. It's adjusting in real time. Instead, he comes out and blames diversity and tries to hide from his own record on airline safety. This is pathetic. They are to blame for this because it's this ideology, it's this mentality that leads to crashes like this. And finally, I'll leave you with this. So, since the crash happened, Trump has blamed the crash on Barack Obama, Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, the 2020 election, diversity, and Pete Buttigieg. So Pete decided to chime in. Of course, he was the transportation secretary of the previous administration. So Pete sees this and he responds, despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had 0 commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. He nailed his ass to the wall on that. He nailed his ass to the wall. No, bitch, you own this. You own this. You know you own this. You're like slash and burn approach to government. It also applied to the FAA. And there are consequences to that. It makes airlines less safe. That's the bottom line. Now, you could say, hey, man, this was just a freak accident, and maybe it wouldn't have mattered if we had more air traffic controllers and everybody was trained better, if we had an administrator at the FAA, et cetera. That's a fair opinion to have. But bottom line is, if you want to prevent this sort of stuff from happening more often in the future, there's no doubt you have to reverse course away from this anti-government insanity, and you have to beef up the FAA and airline safety. This is not fucking rocket science. It's not rocket science. But instead, we have a coward who would rather lie, deflect, and obfuscate and blame diversity rather than talk about the real solutions. So there you go. Like I said, I'm off air for like 15 minutes and I got to get right back on air because never a dull moment anymore, man.